deliver this message.
Assalamu alaikum, family. Here we are, Nation Town TV live. Listen, we're going to get into Black Wall Street. We're going to do another installment of Xposed. We're going to expose some things about Black Wall Street that at this day and age, we really need to have an understanding of. We're going to expose a couple of myths and disprove a couple of myths, but we'll get into it. Let's get it.
I was told to deliver this message.
Assalamu alaikum, family. It's your brother Landon X, and this is Nation Town TV Live, and we are back with another installment of the Xposed series, specifically dealing right now with a case for separation. But this is a special installment because it's not just about separation. This is what we're going to do on this is that we're going to highlight a particular highlight of separation in our history. Remember, history is best qualified to reward research. So we're going to go over Black Wall Street because the thing about Black Wall Street, well, let me just go ahead and start off in the proper fashion. First and foremost, in the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Most Merciful, I bear witness that there is no God but Allah, who appeared to us in the person of Master W. Fard Muhammad, to whom praises are due forever. I further bear witness that Muhammad is his messenger, with all due love and respect for Prophet Muhammad ibn Abdullah, peace be upon him, who revealed the Holy Quran 1400 years ago, over the span of 23 years that set off a remarkable Islamic renaissance. The Holy Quran made me a promise, though. In Surah 16 and 36, it made me a promise. In fact, it made you a promise in Surah 10:47 and in Surah 14 and 4. That promise was that certainly a messenger would be raised for every nation, and that messenger would speak the language of that people, and the only one that fits that bill, as far as I'm concerned, whether you like it or not, is the most honorable Elijah Muhammad. But see, here's the rub, as they used to say back in the day. I would know nothing about the most honorable Elijah Muhammad, nor would I know anything about Master Fard Muhammad, if it were not for this brother right here, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, our divine leader, teacher, guide, and criterion in our midst. And I greet all of the Nation Town family with the words of peace. We say it in the Arabic language. That's the language that we spoke long before we knew anything about the grafted, bastardized language called English. In fact, it's the language that we spoke long before we knew anything about the grafted bastard that taught us English, and that is the Arabic language. I greet you in that language in the words of peace. Assalamu alaikum, family. Shout out to everybody chiming in. Brother Mark Muhammad, Jerome Flex Blakely, Sister Bernadette, Sister Antisha, Brother Salam H. Shabazz, wa alaikum salam, everybody. Brother Hakeem, Sister Sandra from Mosque 27, Sister Gina, and everybody else that's chiming in. Feel free to hit us up with your questions or comments. Make sure you hit that like button and make sure you share this. Make sure you share this because we're going to deal with a topic that really should be the number one issue of the day right now, which is separation. You probably thinking, no, Brother Landon, something went down last week, and that should be the topic of our conversation. And therein lies the problem. If you think what happened last Tuesday should be the topic of black conversations right now, then you really need to watch this episode because inshallah, we're going to get into what's most important for our people right now. It was what was most important for us yesterday and is what is most important for us today. What am I speaking of? I'm speaking of what we know as Black Wall Street. But here's the thing. I don't think a lot of us really know. A lot of us think we know about Black Wall Street. I'm talking about the little miniature empire that was built in the middle of nowhere in what used to be Indian territory in a place called Tulsa, Oklahoma, which happens to be my birthplace. It's also the place where I spent the first 17 years of my life. And I actually heard of Black Wall Street when I was in elementary school. I didn't learn about it in elementary school. Don't get it twisted. But when you grow up in the same place where Black Wall Street existed, in fact, the neighborhood, Greenwood and Archer, that neighborhood just outside of downtown, was about 5 minutes from where I grew up, if that, depending on how fast you drive it. But there are a lot of misconceptions because information about Black Wall Street just really started to raise to the surface, I would say maybe 20 years ago, right around the time social media began to expand. And Black Wall Street became one of the top woke topics. And that was a good thing about social media, is that we started to really at least discuss Black Wall Street and really spread it out because it was not taught in schools. It was probably taught in a few Black history classes in different colleges, maybe a historically Black college like Langston in Oklahoma, or other historically otherwise known as HBCUs. But there are a lot of misconceptions. You know, as recent as a couple of weeks ago, I had a conversation with a brother, and he, I don't want to say regurgitated, but he kind of repeated one of the main misconceptions. And I'm going to go over 5 myths about Black Wall Street. And if we overcome these 5 myths, I think that would be a huge hurdle to clear as far as us not only repeating Black Wall Street where it existed, but we have the capacity right now to have a Black Wall Street in every municipality here in America right now. And I'm not talking about something we could have 200 years from now. I'm talking about something we could build right now, and it could be up and running and every bit as successful as the original Black Wall Street within 5 years. And I'm going to explain why I feel that way and break it down real quick. We might not be on long, but definitely hit us up with questions and comments. Make sure you share. Keep in mind you are watching Nation Town TV Live, which is, of course, brought to you by NationTownStore.com. I mean, we're going to talk about how Black Wall Street start, but I'm going to give you a little spoiler alert. They start with recycling black dollars. It's So make sure y'all hit up nationtownstore.com for your free samples of our personal care products. You know, pies, cookies, the whole nine. Get you some liquid gold. Got to have some liquid gold. If you don't know what liquid gold is, man, you got to get yourself together. And pretty soon we're going to be adding other products that are necessary. Black owned, black distributed, of course. But make sure you hit that up. Also, show us some love on doforself.net, which is a free, 100% free for the free 99 black owned, black operated learning annex where you can go and learn some things. We're constantly adding to it and editing new content, dealing with everything from stealing away from your day job and you know, freeing yourself up economically to alternative currencies, as well as interviews with actual real life black young professionals and how they were able to reach that status. So let's get right to it. And of course, as always, family, we are an independent, 100% black entity here at Nationtown TV. So make sure you support that entity by hitting us up on Cash App, $ Nationtown. And of course, 10% of the Nationtown proceeds do go to our Yes Ma'am program, where we actually provide free meals and a message, as well as personal care glad bags for our family in need out here in the streets of Los Angeles and elsewhere, if possible. So make sure you hit us up on that. And let's go ahead and jump right into it, because like I said, I got a few points that I want to jump on and really bust up these myths, because this is the issue of the day. And what really got me on this topic was reading the #1 news not controlled by the Jews, the Final Call newspaper. I was reading the Final Call. Y'all know how we do. The Final Call newspaper. And I was reading the words from the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. After reading the cover story, this is from last week. We got a new issue coming out next week that's asking the question, what's next? Very good question. What's next after that event that took place last Tuesday? What's next? In reading the minister's words, and first when I just ran into the article itself that the minister, keep in mind the Final Call newspaper, every issue of the Final Call, page 19, you're going to run into an article from the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and then page 20, right after that, you're going to run into the words of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. But in that article, the title kind of struck me. The critical hour demands building a future for ourselves and our people, by the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. Make sure you get you a subscription to the Final Call. You can get one from nationtownstore.com. Read this article. But then it was what the minister actually said in it that really shook me. It really shook me, because it got me to really thinking. And the first thing came to my mind was economic development. And one of the greatest aspects of that was Black Wall Street. But check out what he said. In the article, there was one paragraph in particular that caught my attention. The minister says, and I quote, "And if we don't have the mind and the spirit to bring ourselves out of the condition that we are in, then we deserve whatever chastisement Allah will bring upon us for our refusal to accept our responsibility." Listen, family, I got to read that again, because I got to emphasize a few parts. And if we don't have the mind and the spirit to bring ourselves out of the condition that we are in, then we deserve whatever chastisement Allah, not Donald Trump, Allah will bring upon us for our refusal to accept whose responsibility? Our responsibility. So that kind of caught me slipping right there. I mean, I've heard the minister mention that before, but it hit different, like they say out here on the West Coast. It hit different, given the event of last week. It hit different, given our overall conditions. So I decided this was something that I intended to go into. For those of you who may or may not know, before we went into this pandemic situation, I was and still am, by the grace of Allah, a member of the ministry class at Muhammad Mosque number 27, and our beloved Western Regional Student Minister Abdul Malik Saeed Muhammad has granted me the opportunity to speak a few times from the rostrum, and this was a topic that I really wanted to go deep in from the rostrum. I kind of did the first time I was able to do my first real lecture, but I really wasn't able to get into it as far as busting up the myths as I wanted to. So we're going to do it here real quick. If you don't mind, Nation Town family, once again, shout out to everybody chiming in. Again, hit us with your questions and comments. Sister Gina, shout out to her. Wa alaikum salam. And of course, our executive producer, Sister Sana Joy, showing love always. All praise due to Allah. Hit us up with the likes, the thumbs up, the hearts. Hit us with the mad face if you get mad, because y'all know how Nation Town do. We gonna get into some things that might ruffle your feathers, and if it does, all praises due to Allah, because you're not going to change your condition without getting a little inconvenience, without getting shook up a little bit. If you ever drove down the street and saw someone living in a terrible condition, whether they're homeless or whatever, the worst part of that is that they become okay with their condition. They become comfortable in their condition. Not to pass judgment, but that's something that happens. People become okay with some of the most wretched conditions. So we're going to deal with some things. Let's get it started first and foremost. Like I said, we're dealing with Black Wall Street. Let's deal with the highlights first, the good. What you see right here, this is a picture of some of the most established men of Black Wall Street. And then beneath the photograph of them, you see just some of their accomplishments. Now, keep in mind, all of these businesses right here, they existed in about a 36 to 40 block radius. Greenwood was not a town. This ain't one of the main myths that I'm gonna bust up, but Greenwood was not a town. It was a section, and still is a section of Tulsa, Oklahoma. You can go there to this day. The Greenwood Cultural Center, which has an exhibit paying homage to Black Wall Street, is sitting right in the heart of that. You can even see some of the houses that some of these millionaires who were, per capita, and when you consider inflation, were basically millionaires where they lived. They were 3-4 story brick houses, real brick, not these fake brick houses that they make these days that are just brick in the front, brick facade, and then in the back it's all plywood and chalk. But but it was only a 36 to 40 block radius. It wasn't this huge place. However, you have to understand transportation was different. It was different. They all had cars. Many of them had cars or whatnot. But back then, it made sense to really put things, within walking distance everywhere you went. So you had about 600 total businesses, 21 churches, 21 restaurants. Now, this is what's interesting. When you go through, I got to stop right there, because when you go through the hood, quote unquote, today, usually the churches will outnumber the businesses. Easily outnumber the businesses. But you had 21 churches, 21 restaurants. Remember, all Black owned, 30 grocery stores, little markets on the corner. 2 movie theaters, including the classic Dreamland Theater. 6 private airplanes. Private. So essentially an airport. Plus a hospital, a bank, post office, schools, plural, libraries, law offices, and even a bus system. But I want to actually show you a little bit of this. because I don't want to just tell you about it, just show you pictures. I mean, because what we looking at, family, we looking at something with Black Wall Street that just really, we got to soak in, because it's not history. It's possible prophecy. Yeah, I'm going to say that again. Y'all didn't catch that. It's not just history. Stop looking at it like it's just something in the museum that can never happen again. Okay? Really, everything in history can, and if we're not careful, will. Even slavery can happen again. In fact, it's already happening again if we understand. But let's look at some things real quick. Let's look at some things. This is Tulsa in the early 1900s. Beautiful film work that was remastered in color. Of course, they didn't have color back then, but it was remastered. You see the cars, and understand, cars back then were almost like yachts. Like now, everybody got a car. Back then, to have a car, a Packard or a Ford, T-model Ford, was the equivalent of having your own private yacht today. It wasn't something that everybody had. It was really a luxury. It was a luxury for the richest of people. Did y'all see all them cars lined up? Trucks humming up and down the street, business. Black people, young and old, going back and forth, taking care of business. That was a teenager right there. Look at that. C&B Bottling Co., Tulsa, Oklahoma. Read the boxes. Everybody working, got something to do, somewhere to go. That was Black Wall Street. But like I said, it was a lot of myths about Black Wall Street that gotta be busted up. It has to be busted up. Not to mention that there were over 200 other independent black towns just like it that were built around the same time. So we're going to jump right into some of the misconceptions and some of the myths, as I said. But we're going to start with how Black Wall Street started. So that's going to be the first myth that we're going to deal with, family. The first myth is this. Black Wall Street myth number one. They got rich off the oil boom. And these are myths. I want to be clear. These are myths that are perpetuated, that are put out there by the enemy. But I've heard every myth that we're going to go over. I got 5 major myths that we're going to go over. But I've heard all of them come out of the mouths of black people. And, they didn't know no better. It's a lot of our history that we're ignorant of. But I've heard this come out of the mouths of black people. But I got to bust that up with actual facts. First of all, here's what really happened. 2 very racist events led to Black Wall Street. And both of those events happened prior to the oil boom. If you don't know, Oklahoma in the early 1900s was essentially the Saudi Arabia of America. Now it's Texas and I believe North Dakota. North Dakota is the new kid on the block as far as oil production. But, it became Texas after Oklahoma. There's still oil being produced in Oklahoma. But right now, the 2 biggest producers are the states of North Dakota and Texas. But in the early 1900s, it was solely Oklahoma. That oil boom started in the early 1900s when they discovered oil by accident in a place called Salinas, Oklahoma. This was in the early 1900s. Now do the math. Remember that number. The oil boom really took off. If you ever heard the term boom town, that was coined by what happened in northeastern Oklahoma after they discovered oil. But the formation of independent black towns and communities in the state of Oklahoma, just in the state of Oklahoma, far preceded the oil boom. Here are the 2 events that led to black people doing for self in the state of Oklahoma. First of all, in 1831, there was the tragic Trail of Tears that was kicked off. This is where Native Americans, our Native American brothers and sisters, were forced from the Southeast, places like Florida, Georgia, Alabama. They were forced from that area, Louisiana, and they were forced to walk thousands of miles in treacherous conditions. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with the Southeast. It ain't just because it's in the South don't mean it's 80 degrees all year round. Throughout the South, you get rain, sleet, top-notch heat, but they were forced on foot to go from, places like Florida, Georgia, Mississippi, Louisiana, into places like, the Midwest, such as Oklahoma, Wisconsin, Texas, parts of Texas and whatnot. Now, many of these Native Americans actually had plantations in the South, and many of them owned slaves. Now, when you hear that word slave, don't fidget too much off top, because there are different types of slavery. Now, this was a part of chattel slavery, but when Native Americans owned slaves, they didn't treat them like slaves. They became essentially a part of their family. It was okay for them to even marry into that family. One way or another, a black male slave could marry a tribal daughter and have children. A tribe chieftain could marry a black slave and have children. There was no Toby, Kunta Kinte type situations where they were whipping them or, mistreating them and all of that. They became a part of their family, and they helped them to cultivate their land in places like Florida, Mississippi, so forth and so on. Let me show you some photographs. So they were actually a part of the family, but when the Trail of Tears took place, when the Native Americans had to move, all of their slaves, if they had them, came with them. So this is where photos like this come from. This is where photos like this come from. See, here's a chieftain right here who had a mixed race daughter, mixed race grandchildren. And this is how, black folks, we always, if our hair is anything other than concrete nappy, we say we got Indian in our family. Well, this is how that happened. So we migrated we were in the Trail of Tears too. So the thing to remember about this is that this proves that there has never been any type of wickedness in the United States that the black man has not had to suffer in. We suffered with our Native American brothers and sisters through the Trail of Tears. We had our own suffering. We fought in every war that this country has fought in. Every war. And we died and suffered. The first to die, in fact, Crispus Attucks, who Stokely Carmichael, also known as Kwame Ture, may Allah be pleased, said was a damn fool. And I agree. He's also a good friend of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, Kwame Ture, may Allah be pleased. So in 1831, that's when that started, the Trail of Tears. In 1863 through 65, you had the ratification and the production of the Emancipation Proclamation. And then you had another event later, which was the Oklahoma Land Run. When they gave Native Americans this land, they made the eastern portion of Oklahoma Indian Territory, and then they took it from them and then told white people, hey, if you get there first, you own the land. They didn't even do that right. They had already stolen the land from Native Americans. But then on top of that, they didn't even go when they were supposed to. They went sooner than they were supposed to. That's why the University of Oklahoma called themselves the Oklahoma Sooners. They're essentially land thieves. I'm talking about your white man that you love so much. He's a land thief. Not only did he steal us, not only did he force the Native Americans to a completely different region, but even when he was being given land, now, you got to be a real thief to steal something that somebody given you. I remember I was watching the movie, I think it was Dead Presidents, when Chris Tucker, they was giving out food to people in the hood and they was still stealing the food. Chris Tucker's like, man, you ain't got to steal it, it's free. You got to be a real thief to steal something that's being given to you. But anyway, prior to the oil boom, 27 black towns were established in Oklahoma. I'm going to say that again. 27. Outside of Tulsa, 27 black towns were established. There's one that still stands today called Boley, Oklahoma. I've never been there, but if you remember the little sister that was Countess Vaughn, who was Brandy's friend on Moesha, she's originally from Boley, Oklahoma. All black town. All black town. There were 27 of those in Oklahoma prior to the oil boom. Now, when those black towns were established, because I gotta get you to use a little bit of common sense. When they were established, do you think they needed goods and services? Do you think they needed food? Do you think they needed clothes? Do you think they needed all the things that a human being needs in America? Of course they did. You think they set up there butt naked and out of doors until the oil boom? No, they began immediately. As soon as they were free, because there was no beef. When the Emancipation Proclamation, in fact, before the Emancipation Proclamation was signed, there was no beef between Native Americans who owned slaves. They only owned slaves by law. So if a black man who was a part of an Indian tribe wanted to get up and leave, they didn't try to stop him. In fact, they would offer to pay them for them to stay on their reservation and help, or on their plantation, and help them continue to cultivate the land. And many of them chose to go and start their own towns. This was before the oil boom. So we had to bust that up. That idea that, these were just black people balling off the oil boom. Black people had no stake in the oil boom. They did have some of the oil rig jobs that paid the least and were most dangerous. There's a movie you want to go see called There Will Be Blood. And in that movie, it doesn't deal with black people in the oil boom, but it does show you how crude and how dangerous the oil drilling business was back then, where they would have to dig a hole several feet deep, go down, and then somebody would have to go in the hole and help guide a drill bit that was about the size of a flagpole, but it weighed 4,000 or 5,000 pounds, and they had to guide it down. And if that drill bit slipped off of the chain, then you got a 4,000 or 5,000 pound spike coming right down at you. And that happened very often as they drilled for oil throughout the Southwest. And guess who got to get that job? Of course, it would be us. Of course, it would be us. So again, hit us up. Questions, comments. Shout out to everybody chiming in. Something like a family. Look like we back on. Hold tight just a moment. All right, all praises due to Allah. Look like we back on. Cool. We back. All praises due to Allah. Just a little technical difficulties. But shout out to everybody chiming in. Brother Hakeem says, we have no vested interest in the outcome of this election. I'm not going to touch on that, brother, but it kind of speaks for itself. And he says, I appreciate the original name of the Sooners, great history class. All praises due to Allah. But that's what we're going to get into. We're going to get into the history, and we're going to bust up some myths, because I think some of these myths, we are using them as excuses not to build again. Not to build again. So this is what this is about. This whole episode is about voting for us, voting for Black Wall Street. You know, you can say what you want about this candidate, that candidate, what they did in the past and all that. What about you? Would you vote for you? Would you vote for Black Wall Street? Would you vote for these brothers that I just showed you? These brothers and sisters that I just showed you. Let me show you again. Would you vote for this? Is this something that you would support? Are these individuals that are worth your vote? Is this a lifestyle that you think is worth your vote? Having all your own. Packards, lining up and down. A Packard back then, first of all, a Packard was designed by a black man, that car. But a Packard was like a BMW. It was not something that that the average individual had in America at that time. So going back to that last question, I'm going to bring it back up again because I'm going to get an official verdict. Black Wall Street, myth number one. They got rich off the oil boom. And the answer to that is wrong. Wrong. Shout out to Charlie Murphy. May Allah be pleased. Straight wrong. Straight wrong. They did not get rich off the oil boom. So we're going to keep it going, family. Make sure y'all hit us up again. Nation Town, Cash App, $ Nation Town. Show us some love. Keep that Black Wall Street spirit alive. But let's go to the next myth. Now this myth, I think, is one of the more popular myths. This is one of the more popular myths. Because when I see people who are even interested in rebuilding something like Black Wall Street, this is usually what they look for. And that tells me that they don't really know how the original Black Wall Street or all the Black Wall Streets, remember there were 200 successful independent black towns. This was just the most successful of them all. So when I hear people talk like this today, I know, oh, you don't really know how the original one started if you think that that's the way the next one should start. Let me tell you what I'm talking about. Black Wall Street myth number two, the founders were already rich and educated. Already rich and educated. Wrong. Wrong again. No, sir. No, sir. They were not already rich. Here's what did not happen in the founding and building of Black Wall Street. You didn't have a bunch of hoity-toity, sedity, bourgeois Negroes from other places like New York or Chicago who were already free and had established themselves, had graduated from some kind of school somewhere. And then, they just all met up one day in the middle of nowhere in Indian Territory, looked around and said, this would be a nice place for us to flex. No, that's not how it went down. That is not how it went down. Far from the truth. And I say that because we think that that's how we need to have a Black Wall Street now. Like, we get mad at athletes and entertainers when they brag about what they bought or whatever. And then we say, oh, man, how come they ain't started no schools? How come they ain't started no grocery stores? How come they ain't started no hospitals? That's not T.I.'s job. That's not NBA Youngboy's job. That's not Diddy's job. That's your job. It's what we're failing to do as a collective that's keeping us from doing that. As a collective. You understand? In fact, here's the truth of the matter. Black Wall Street began with brothers like this former sharecroppers, some of which were born as slaves. They were dirt poor, piss poor, but very skilled and very committed to being free, independent, and made equal. That's what they had. They had the desire. Desire feeds the will, so teaches the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. But they did not have money. They did not have education. In fact, I saw an exhibit of some of the deeds that were signed from home ownership back during Black Wall Street. And many of those deeds of home ownership and even business ownership were signed with an X. Not because they just recited in the Nation of Islam. No, it was an X because they could not read or write. So these were black men and women who only had skills. They knew how to work with their hands. They knew how to sew. They knew how to build. And they had it in their heart. And it also was a necessity. They could not buy goods and services anywhere else. Nigga, get out my store. Nigga, you on the wrong side of town. Nigga, you got 5 minutes to get out this side of town. If you here by sundown, you're going to be swinging off a tree. That was the everyday struggle of a black man when he ever found himself amongst white people. And really hasn't a whole lot changed. Just look at your timeline. Brother can't go to this restaurant, that restaurant. Some professional brothers got arrested just for going into Starbucks in Philadelphia last year. So it ain't really changed like you think it has. But it started with these black people simply using what they had. But here's the thing, they bartered and purchased what they needed from each other. In fact, an economic base is not based on just starting businesses. It's actually based on how you spend your money. It's consumerism, family. It's not entrepreneurship. I'm sorry. Somebody lied to you. And we still perpetuating that lie. Start business, start businesses, start business. Do you know we already have enough businesses? But all of these businesses are operating on an island, on a little Negro island of their own. And they're not getting support from other black people. And they're just on an island. And they have a warped perception of how to do business. Because we think we have all these choices as consumers. So Black Wall Street is a product of consumerism, meaning how we spent our money, not how we started businesses. In fact, y'all hear me say this all the time. I'm going to keep saying it. Outside of local and federal government, black-owned businesses are the #1 employers of black people. There's no other group or entity that can claim to employ more black people than black businesses other than the government. That's why when you go to the DMV or any other government building, you see plenty of sisters, always sisters, and a couple of homosexual brothers sitting up there, always on their lunch break, 24/7. That's because the federal and local government are the #1 employers of black people. #2 on that list is black-owned businesses, despite the fact that we only spend 2% of our expendable income on black-owned business. So just imagine if we spent 10%. They did an actual Black Enterprise did did research and found out, they did a study and found out that if we all increased our black-owned business spending from 2% to just 2.25%, if we all did it within a year, that would create 1 million black jobs just like that. Just like that. No begging, no voting, no crying, no marching, no rioting, no elections, no matter who's president, just like that. So just imagine 20%. If we went from 2% to 20%, that's a national takeover right there. See? And what you had with Black Wall Street was the fact that it was 100% recycled money. And we're going to get into the speed and the power of recycled money in a moment. So that was an absolutely wrong myth when it comes to Black Wall Street. Let's keep it moving, family. Let's keep it moving. Myth number 3. Black Wall Street myth number 3. All of the businesses opened suddenly together like a grand opening. You know, and I don't want to come off like I'm, like I'm hating or anything, but there was a situation, well, that was a project, and I think it was a well-meaning thing, or a particular group or individual decided to name this real estate fund after Black Wall Street. And then they went, viral with it and went public with it and everything. And, and that's just not how it started. That's just not how you do it. Even today, that's just not how you do it. You started as a tiny life germ from your daddy, whether you knew your daddy or not. And when him and your mama did that life germ, microscopic, you would need a microscope just to barely see it. That life germ mixed with ovum. And then that created a small little clot that later turned into an embryo, and it went through a process of 9 months. And then when you were born, you had to start back to square one. Somebody had to show you how to walk, how to talk, how to feed yourself, how to use the bathroom, without help. You started all over again. Then you started school, and then you started all over again then. And then from school, each level of school, you had to start over and start over. It was a constant growth process. Businesses are just like babies. Economic development is just like babies. They start small and they have to grow. So Black Wall Street, being that it just started, like I said, these bougie Negroes just all showed up in Oklahoma, snapped their fingers, spent a bunch of money, and then all of a sudden all of that I just showed you just dropped out the sky. It didn't work like that. Wrong. No, sir. No, ma'am. That came about. I'm going to show you the first business that was established, the first operational business that was established on Black Wall Street. This is an actual photo. You can't even tell what it is. That used to be, and actually in this picture, this is operational in this picture. This is not after the attack, the 1921 attack. This was while it was operational. You wouldn't even walk in there today. That's a grocery store. But that was the first thing that they established. Naturally. Because last time I checked, the one thing that human beings all have in common, no matter what political party you support, don't matter what kind of clothes you like to wear, don't matter what your religion is, we all got to eat. That's where it started. It started with necessity and consumerism. Many of these entrepreneurs didn't necessarily have expertise in the field where they started their businesses. They needed those businesses. See, need is a hell of a thing. Need can bring things out of you that you never thought were there. And if you think we don't need grocery stores today just because you see Ralph and Kroger and Publix and Piggly Wiggly, then you lying to yourself. We need them today just as much as we needed them then, but we were not under the illusion back then that we didn't need them. So we needed that. And then that led to other types of businesses, bakeries, butcher shops, packaging goods. I mean, remember, Tulsa's in the middle of nowhere. So when they built the railroads in the early 1900s, now we were able to get goods shipped back and forth. So somebody had to help with that shipping. So you have brothers who did the shipping, all by necessity. And then once we got our necessities down pat, then brothers started to, brothers had to look good. Got to get the barbershop, had to get the conch right. Had to get the conch right, had to get the line up right. Come on, man. The shoes shine. And then after getting all those necessities, then came the movie theater. Then came this. Then came the jewelry store. Then came the fancy restaurants and all that kind of stuff. And then that's when you saw the brothers looking like this. Then the brothers got fly. Now, mind you, and I'm going to get into this in a minute, we're not talking about a long span of time here. Remember, these were uneducated, former sharecroppers. Some of them were born in slavery. Slavery had just ended, 1863. Chattel slavery, 1863. Tulsa got the nickname Negro Wall Street. It was initially called Negro Wall Street, not Black Wall Street, by white business writers, like Wall Street Journal type writers in New York, who had traveled to Tulsa in the early 1900s to cover the oil boom. See, this is why you got Negroes that think that the oil boom started it. Because white writers from New York and Chicago came to Tulsa to see the oil boom, to see white people successful. And then they ran into us. And they couldn't write it in there as all these black people did for themselves. No, they had to say, somehow the money trickled down to them. You mean to tell me that the same Negroes who couldn't even use a bathroom in South Tulsa, outside of the Greenwood district, couldn't even use a bathroom, couldn't buy an apple, couldn't even buy a bucket of chitlins outside of their area, but somehow they were getting money off the oil boom? Come on now. But they came down to Tulsa and they saw us balling and they said, wow, it's like a Negro Wall Street. That's what but they established that in the early 1900s. By 1910, it was known as the Negro Wall Street. So do the math. 1865 to 1910. That's about 45 years, 30 to 45 years of development. Back then, before the internet, before every Negro had a college degree with a sorority and fraternity license plate in the front of their car. No. This is before Negroes was woke. This was before the world is very small now because of the internet. This is before that. So if it could take 35, 45 years ago back then, that means it could take 3 years today with the education, the access to capital that we have today, the money that we have in our pockets today, $1.3 trillion of spending power. You do the math. It's quite simple, family. Man, y'all hit me up with questions and comments. Make sure y'all hitting that like. Make sure y'all sharing. We got a few more points before we get up out of here. Brother Hakeem says blueprints on how to rebuild the ruined cities, our communities. That's right, dear brother. Shout out to Sister Precious. Wa alaikum salam. All right, so that's the truth of the matter. That's how it really started. Now think about that. 30 to 45 years, Black Wall Street back then at the turn of the century was built. 30 years ago today was what? 1990? How many of y'all watching remember 1990? I'm not even that old. I remember 1990. 40 years ago was 1980. 45 years ago was 1975. So there are things that could have been done in 1975 that could have had Black Wall Streets in every city right now. But instead, we spent from 1975 to now and many years before that only begging instead of building. That's the difference between us and Black Wall Street. Let's keep it moving. I'm getting to the point where I'm about to hurt some feelings. And that's all right. You be all right. Walk it off. Sometimes it's you. All right. Here's number 4. Oh, I like this one. Black Wall Street myth number 4. Now, I don't really hear this myth, but I know people think it. They got to, because fast forward to 2020, damn near 2021, we think it today. Black Wall Street myth, they voted for it, or the government helped them somehow. Now, it's actually some truth to this myth. Slightly, very slightly. Because when they had the Oklahoma land run, black people weren't necessarily permitted, but black people were able to acquire some land in the land run after white folks got all the land that they wanted. It was a couple of black families who looked around and said, hey, man, ain't nobody setting up shop here. All right, well, I'm going to set up shop right here. But that was in the middle of Oklahoma. It wasn't in Tulsa. It wasn't around Black Wall Street. It was in the middle of nowhere, barren land. And they were able to peacefully set up shop there. But like I said, the 27 towns in Oklahoma, the 27 black towns were already established. So this had nothing to do with Black Wall Street. But here's why this is so important. That idea that they voted for, or they used government assistance, this is a beautiful dichotomy that I want y'all to really pay attention to. Now, some of y'all are going to be offended by this, because I'm going to invoke a name. I'm going to bring somebody up who a lot of black people who know of this person, they have a high estimation of this person. They think highly of this person. And I'm not telling you that I don't. But I'm just going to give you a historical dichotomy that proves what works and what doesn't work. There was a brother back in the late 1800s and early 1900s by the name of Edwin McCabe. Well, let me tell you the good news first, because it's going to sound like I'm dissing him in a minute, but I'm really not. I'm just showing you a dichotomy. Edwin McCabe was an attorney. He's a very educated, this is the kind of educated brother that you thought started Black Wall Street, but it's not the case. But he was educated. And at one point he was living in Kansas. And when he heard about the land run, mind you, this is already early 1900s. This is past the point where Black Wall Street was already established. But he heard about the land run. He knew that there was available land in Oklahoma. So what he had this brilliant idea, he had this idea of going to the federal government and begging or asking, who the president at the time, at 1889, was Benjamin Harrison. He went to Benjamin Harrison and proposed an all-black state. He wanted Oklahoma to be an all-black state. Just give us Oklahoma. Now, this was 1889, slightly before the oil boom. Now, I got to give it to him. If Benjamin Harrison would have co-signed on that, then that would have been hellified for black people, because that means that all that oil that was later found in Oklahoma would have been ours. So, I give him kudos for that. But mind you, when he went from the moment he went to Washington, D.C. with his hand out. Now, let me tell you, let me give you a quick biography of Edwin McCabe. Before he went begging for a state in Washington, D.C., he went to New York, to the White Wall Street, and he tried to become a trader with a D, not traitor with a T. He went to White Wall Street and tried to get into that business. They said, nigga, get out of here. New York. So get out of that mentality that, everything above the Mason-Dixon line, it was all good between black people and white people. Stop it. Ask a black person that been in Chicago longer than 40, 50 years. They'll tell you. Ask somebody that been in New York longer than 40, 50 years. They'll tell you. But he went to New York and tried to work on Wall Street, White Wall Street. They said, nigga, we'll give you a job as a porter, or you can bust tables. This is an educated black man. He said, oh no. So he went from New York. He went to places like Chicago. He went to DC. So he went to all these places looking to integrate economically in the white man system. Now, mind you, this whole time, poor, uneducated, hardworking black folks were building while Edwin McCabe was begging. They were building while Edwin McCabe was begging. He actually transitioned. He died in 1920 at the height of Black Wall Street. He visited Black Wall Street and he was mesmerized by it. He didn't understand, how did they do it? Who signed off on it? Who did they vote for? Did Benjamin Harrison give him the money? He didn't understand. Now, he did help establish Langston, Oklahoma, which is home to the historically black college, Langston University. I give him that much. But that town was established because he thought, even though just up north in Tulsa, you had black people who were not educated under the white man's system building an empire, he still felt like the route to black success was white education. So he built his town around Langston, the college, the university. Shout out to all my people that go to Langston. I got a nephew that went to Langston and played football and is a coach there. I love, everybody that went to Langston. I'm proud of Langston. I think it's the westernmost historically black college in America. But just think about that dichotomy. This brother, he meant well. He was going from he went to Chicago, he went to New York, he went to Washington, D.C., trying to network with white power in order to get something for us. I'm not mad at him for that. I'm not mad at him at all. He didn't know better. That was his thinking. I got to go to the president. I got to go to Chicago. I got to go to New York. Oh, the white people got a lot of money in New York. If I can just get in good with them, then I can get something for my people. He was trying to build something for his people, and he eventually did. But he literally died trying to beg for something that black people were already building. 27 black towns were established while he was bouncing between Chicago and New York and Washington, D.C., trying to ride their boat, trying to get in good in their system instead of establishing your own. So let Edwin McCabe, let this brother be an example. He went the slow route. The brothers up in Tulsa went the laser fast route. And the fastest route is to do for self, not to go around looking for permission. That was his thing. He wanted to establish an all-black state. I'm cool with that. The Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad says that the American government owes us that, and they do. But the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad does not, and will not sit around waiting on it. While he was telling the American, I'm talking about the messenger right now, when the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad produced the Muslim program, the same time he was producing the Muslim program and what the Muslims want, 10 points, what the Muslims believe, 12 points, he was building the Nation of Islam with our own businesses in every city where black people exist in America. So he wasn't waiting on. That's the difference. This country owes us everything. We just asking for 8 to 10 states. We feel like we deserve that much minimum, but we ain't waiting on nothing in the Nation of Islam. But if you ask us what's owed to us, well, let's cash out. Let's add it up. So it don't have to be either or. You don't have to be sitting around, sitting on your elbows, sitting on your shoulders, waiting on reparations, or doing for self. The hell? It's 23 hours, 56 minutes, 46 seconds in every day. You got enough time to do both. And it behooves you to build. And then when you build, your begging transforms into bargaining. Like, y'all didn't hear me. When you build, your begging becomes bargaining. See? It's just begging when you ain't doing a damn thing for yourself. It's just like you got a, come on, let me put it in regular terms. You got a cousin. Don't want to work. Don't want to do nothing. Sit around all day playing PlayStation. You ain't never seen him or her apply themselves on anything. And they come to you, they see you, hey, Unc, hey, Auntie. Hey, man, I got this move, man, I'm trying to make, man. I just need $500. You just give me $500. Come on, man. I'm your cousin. I'm your nephew. Come on. You're going to step back and look at their current condition and say, listen, man, when I give you that $500, you're going to be begging me for another $5 tomorrow. But see, when you go from begging to bargaining by building, now America's looking at it not like a giveaway, but like an investment. Because see, the GDP, the American economy is the American economy, bottom line. So if we prove ourselves to be an industrious people, now whoever's in power is saying if we give these Negroes $1, they're going to give us back $2 in taxes. If we give them $5, they're going to give us back $10 in taxes. Because they down there working, they balling. Let's go ahead and invest in what they're already doing. So once we start building, the begging turns into bargaining. We don't have any bargaining chips. We have no leverage right now. Because we sitting around stabbing each other in the back, hating on each other, not supporting the businesses that we already have, but we telling them, oh, you need to give us reparations. Come on, man. No, sir. We got to turn that into bargaining. Go from begging to bargaining by building. It's real simple. So shout out to Edwin McCabe. I'm not dissing the brother. He tried the best way he knew how. But just consider that the whole time he was running around begging, trying to get permission. That's a better way to say it. Trying to get permission from his former slave master. You have black folks in over 200 towns, many of which didn't even know how to write their name, that was straight up building and not waiting for nobody. Shout out to everybody chiming in. All praises due to Allah. We're going to close out after we cover this last one. Again, make sure y'all hit us up. $ Nation Town. Cash App. Keep that Black Wall Street spirit alive and well. We're going to deal with the last. So let me just make it official on that number 4. Black Wall Street myth number 4. They voted for it or needed or used government help. Not only, I can't even use the same Charlie Murphy gif on that one. I can't use the wrong one. To think that we can ever, not back then or today or tomorrow, ever sit around trying to vote our way into salvation. Not only is it wrong, it's hilarious. It is hilarious for us to think that, family. Hilarious. May Allah be pleased with our brother Charlie Murphy. It's hilarious. So let's go to number 5. And then we're going to get up out of here. Now, many of you, here's another myth. And this ain't even a myth. This is just weakness. I'm going to get to the next myth, the next and the last myth. But then there's a weakness I got to touch on. It's some punctified spirits out there. The minister said one of his enemies is weak Negroes. Even weak believers. There's some weak Negroes out there who, when they hear about Black Wall Street, first thing they think about is, well, they burned it down. Wait. First of all, they still burning you down. They still murdering you in the streets. They still raiding your houses. They still disrespecting your women. They doing everything they did in Black Wall Street over the span of time since then. The only mistake they made at Black Wall Street, the only mistake that they made, and this is leading up to number 5, the only mistake that they made is they did not properly rebuild and keep rebuilding. They made a feeble attempt to rebuild after the 1921 attacks. Notice you haven't heard me call it a riot. It was not a riot. It was a straight out attack. But they tried to rebuild, but when they tried to rebuild, they built it. Remember, the first business they established initially was a grocery store. When they tried to rebuild, they tried to do it through the church. And then by the time they were really, invested in trying to rebuild, and this was after many of the millionaires had already moved, they left. They kind of punked out and they left. They went further west or they went up north. But many of them had left. And then came the hope for integration. The hope for integration really started entering the minds of black people around the 40s and the 50s. And then they start sitting on their hands waiting on integration, thinking that once we get integration, kind of like how we doing now with reparations. Sitting on our hands, oh man, it's going to be all good when we get that check, man. We get that check, it's over. Man, when we get to go to the same school with white people, shop at the same stores as white people, live in the same neighborhoods as white people, oh, it's over there. So that's what really was the death blow on Black Wall Street and all the other 200 plus towns, is the integration tactic, the sin, as the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad calls it, the sin of integration. But then there's another myth that deals with the attacks of 1921. Some of y'all believe that the reason that Black Wall Street was attacked and basically conquered was because they didn't fight back. I gotta do the laughing Charlie Murphy again on that one. And here's why. Here's why that deserves the laughing Charlie. You're not using your brain. Oklahoma up until the 1920s and that whole region of America was still the wild, wild west. You didn't go nowhere in the West back then without being strapped. Some of y'all think they didn't even have guns. No. In fact, what really turned the 1921 attack into an all-out attack was a brother who had a gun. But see, when you think your power is in something that your enemy makes exclusively, in fact, he puts his name on it, then you making the wrong bet. Like I said, this was the Wild West. It's just an example right here. It's an example, and then I'm gonna give you a very specific example. This is a brother, you see him. You see that ain't a weird looking belt he got on. Them is 2 6-shooters, not one, but 2 6-shooters. Oklahoma boy. Check him out. Here's a gang. There's a whole gang of them. You see how my boy holding right there. Look at the look on his face. Got the tobacco in his mouth. He look like he wants you to run up. This is what they ran into. This is what them white folks ran into. You couldn't be in the wild, wild west without a gun. That's why they called it the Wild, Wild West. In fact, many of you have heard of the Lone Ranger. You thought it was some white boy running around with some Indian based on some old 1950s TV show. No, the real Lone Ranger was Bass Reeves, an Oklahoma black man. He was one of those black people who grew up within a Native American tribe. That's where Tonto comes from, because he had good friends in every tribe. He knew how to speak the tribal languages. And he stayed strapped. In fact, Those who might know a little bit about Black Wall Street, you know that Black Wall Street is actually the first time any bombs have ever been dropped on American soil. You know why they dropped them bombs? Because the black militias on the ground were successfully fighting back. That's where the bombs came from. And like I said, the only mistake the brothers and sisters of Black Wall Street made is that they didn't continue to fight. They didn't continue to build, They didn't continue to rebuild. Ever since, and this is not a coincidence, ever since the attack of 1921, there have been more and more tornadoes through what they call Tornado Alley, which reaches basically from the Great Lakes down to Texas. That's Tornado Alley. That's where all your tornadoes hit every year, every spring. And every time a tornado rips through a trailer park, picks the whole trailer park up and throws it, the news comes to that trailer park in the middle of Texas, middle of Kansas, middle of Oklahoma, middle of Arkansas, or wherever. And then they ask white people. And it's usually some white boy or white lady with about 3 teeth in her mouth. They ask her, well, your whole trailer park has been thrown to another zip code. What are you going to do? And what does that white lady say every time with them 3 whole teeth in her mouth? She say, well, we just gonna rebuild. This is how white people look at it when they get destroyed. By God. Not by some white folks, by God. Not by some airplanes dropping bombs, by God. Natural bombs. This is God bombing on them with an F5 tornado, which they call the hand of God. But every year they rebuild over. And if you ever drive across country and you see a trailer park, that trailer park then got destroyed 20 times just in the last 20 years. They rebuild every time. They go get a new RV and call it a day. You got to rebuild. You got to rebuild. And if we were that scared of this white man attacking us, we wouldn't be in America at all. Because last time I checked, we still getting attacked in more ways than one. We getting institutionally attacked. But I'm going to touch on one last thing before we get up out of here, family. And this is absolutely necessary. Because we're going to deal with that actual attack and what took place. The actual event that was the excuse for the attack is another learning, another teachable moment that really screams to this era now, to this generation now, where we're still spending 2% of our expendable income because we think white ice is colder. Simple as that. It ain't because, black customer service. It ain't nothing worse than white customer service. You ain't never had a dog sicked on you in a black-owned business. Stop it. You ain't never got arrested just for walking into a black-owned business. Stop it. Oh, I can't find a black. Stop it. Stop it. You go out of your way every time to go to the mall, to go to somebody's mall and spend some money on a T-shirt that got some homosexual white man's name on the back of it. Stop it. So here's what happened, Black Wall Street. Black Wall Street was so successful that a high school child could drop out of high school, go to Black Wall Street and just shine shoes and make more than a school teacher. That's how they was balling in Black Wall Street. It was this young brother, but let me preface this before I even go further. I'm not blaming the 1921 attack on this brother. I'm blaming it on our ignorance, particularly our ignorance of our enemy. What's taught in the Nation of Islam are 3 particular things: knowledge of self, knowledge of God, and knowledge of the devil. This young brother, his name was Richard, I believe Nolan. No, his name was Dick Rowland, so his name was really Richard Rowland. And they call, when your name is Richard, they call you Dick. I'd rather call the brother Richard instead of Dick. His name was Richard Rowland. He was 19 years old. He had spent 3 years on Black Wall Street in the Greenwood district, shining shoes, making good money. But he made a mistake that a lot of us make. And I'm not blaming this brother, but it was bound to happen with the mentality that this brother had. He made a mistake that a lot of us make today. He convinced himself that white money was greener than black money. He said, wow, I'm making all this money shining nigger shoes. How much money could I make shining white man shoes? So he decided to set up his shine box in downtown Tulsa, which is just up the road. You can literally walk from Greenwood to downtown. Nowadays, you can stand on Greenwood right now and look up, and you'll see the Williams Center, where it used to be called the Williams Center, the tallest building in Tulsa, right there. It's walking distance. So he went there, and he set up shop down there, and he did that for a few months. There was only one place downtown where he was allowed as a young black man to use the bathroom, called the Drexel Building. He went into that Drexel Building one day. In order to get to that one colored bathroom, he had to go up an elevator. And in that elevator, something happened. And he ran out of that elevator screaming, with a white girl screaming in the elevator. Word got around. And then that was their excuse to start something. But really, it initially revolved around little Richard Rowland. It was basically a witch hunt. They wanted him to be hung and prosecuted and convicted and, and everything, because they really had beef with Black Wall Street, because Black Wall Street was so successful. So they didn't just run up in Black Wall Street. They surrounded actually the courthouse where Richard Rowland was arrested and held. And they were doing basically what you see them doing these days. They still do it. They did it to Bill Cosby. They did it to Michael Vick. When any of us make a little slight mistake, they make a big deal about it because they want to see us all hang. So they use examples. They make examples out of a few of us. I'm going to show you something real quick. There used to be a newspaper that went out of business in Tulsa, and I'm glad it did, called the Tulsa Tribune. It was the secondary newspaper of Tulsa. The main newspaper is the Tulsa World. But in the Tulsa Tribune, they printed a story where they were giving direct instructions to the public, to the white public. Nab Negro for attacking girl in an elevator. This is instructions now. Newspaper giving straight instructions. Go get this nigga. And they did. They got him. They brought him. They arrested him, brought him to the courthouse. And it was a big melee around the courthouse. The courthouse is not near Black Wall Street. So they brought him there. Long story short, and what's interesting, and this further proves that black folks were strapped back then. There was a black militia that went to the courthouse in order to protect little Richard Rowland. And they actually made those brothers leave. And the second time they came up there in order to hold post and protect their brother, that's when one of the brothers who had a shotgun was approached by a white man who had a shotgun. He said, "Hey, nigger, what you doing with that gun?" And then the brother said, I'm going to use it if I got to. And then there was a scuffle, there was a melee, shots were fired. So now, not only did you have this story of a little Negro boy assaulting a white woman, but now they put it to their people that they're assaulting our women and they running around shooting at us with guns. So they got armed. They had more guns than us. They got armed and they went into Black Wall Street. Moral of the story that I don't want you to lose. And I'm not saying that this wouldn't have happened, because we dealing with a beast. The white man is the devil, plain and simple. He's a beast. He's not your friend, plain and simple. Deal with that. But since we should know that, either by academics or by experience, one way or another, we should know that our brother should have never went there. He should have kept making money amongst his own, spending money amongst his own, using the bathroom amongst his own. And you go through our whole history and our sojourn here in America, especially since the Emancipation Proclamation, we always get into trouble when we start thinking white ice is colder. All of the troubles that we face today is the direct result of integration. And honestly, Richard Rowland was the first integrationist. He thought I can make more money with white people when they actually treated him terribly. Them few weeks that he was shining shoes, he was making less money. They were calling him nigger this, nigger that. They weren't giving him the amount of money that he was actually asking for. He was asking for a nickel per shine. They were throwing pennies at his head. And there's a rumor that many times he was ready to fight back from them disrespecting him. So he kind of was building a reputation as a feisty little Negro. See? And that all led up to that situation. So it keeps coming back. No matter where you go in the wheel of time, in the last 100 years, it keeps coming back to us not pooling our resources, not supporting our own, not dealing with our own. Are we perfect? Hell no. But if you're going to get into the habit of choosing the lesser of two evils between the black and the white, let me go back to the minister's words so I can make it real clear for the family. And if we don't have the mind and the spirit to bring ourselves out of the condition that we are in, then we deserve whatever chastisement Allah will bring upon us for our refusal to accept our responsibility. So listen, family. Some of you will look at that and the information that I gave you and try to wrap it as if I'm just blaming us. But see, I don't have no control over this devil. He is what he is. He's a spider. He's a beast. He's an animal. Spiders are going to spin webs. Snakes are going to slither. There's certain creatures in the world that just do what they do. I don't have no control over that. I'm not going to let a spider spinning a web stop me from being a human being. See? But we're so in love with that spider that we would rather live in his faulty little weak web than live amongst our own. And I'm going to close with this. As the most honorable Elijah Muhammad said himself, history is best qualified to reward our research. So family, I appreciate y'all time. I appreciate y'all sticking it out with me. Through this lesson, we're going to continue the Xposed series as well as the Black Wall Street series. I'm going to keep coming back to this. I'm not going to come off of this. This ain't a gimmick. This is real. This is real. The real black vote is pooling our resources and consumerism, not starting businesses. Start businesses like a baby. You can have all the babies in the world, but if you don't feed none of them, you don't take care of none of them, you don't teach none of them, what are you doing? So with that said, I'm going to leave you as I greeted you in the words of peace. Assalamu alaikum, family.
I was told to deliver this message.